Hey there, I hope you're doing well. My name is Arya and today we're going to look at some more Reddit stories. If you enjoy Reddit stories, consider liking, subscribing, and maybe hitting that notification bell too. Let's get started with today's first story. Much love, everyone. Today's first story comes from wife cheating with boss husband's revenge heartbreaking true story. The morning started off, like any other, without a hint of the chaos to come. My alarm rang at 5 and, as I began to rise, my wife gently pulled me back, her touch still as electrifying as it was 25 years ago. She then got up to make coffee while I showered, and afterwards I took over the kitchen to make breakfast as she got ready over breakfast. We talked about what our day looked like and she suggested having loaf and baked potatoes for dinner. I agreed, promising to pick up fresh French bread and maybe a peon pie. Peon pie, you're going to spoil me. She said, there's no one else. I'd rather spoil, I replied. We shared a kiss and walked to the garage together, shared another kiss, and then went our separate ways to work. The drive in the morning went by without any issues. Then around 11, my boss, Harry, called me into his office with urgent news. There was trouble in our St. Louis office. Baker had found Smithers with his wife, leading to Baker getting arrested and Smithers ending up in the hospital with no one to manage the office. Harry needed me to fly out by 2:20 p.m. to take over. How long I'd stay depended on the severity of the situation. Between Baker and Smithers, it was unclear when Ether could return to work or how they could work together again, leaving Harry pondering which one to let go. I felt the matter was straightforward, blaming Smithers for the turmoil. Harry, however, mentioned he didn't have all the facts. Only what the secretary had relayed over the phone. Harry suggested I might gather more details upon my arrival. I attempted to inform Diane of the sudden plans, but her secretary informed me she was occupied in a meeting. I promised to reconnect later and went home to pack. Finding Diane's car at home raised my curiosity, as she was supposed to be engaged in a meeting entering the house. I quickly realized the meeting wasn't as I had assumed, based on her secretary's information. A path of clothing, strewn from the couch to the stairs, caught my eye, including men's garments. Near the stairs I discovered men's pants with a wallet in the pocket. I inspected it, noting the name Stan North on the driver's license. Pocketing the wallet, further searching revealed a suit jacket draped over a chair, from which I extracted a checkbook and pocketed it as well. As I approached the upstairs bedroom, the noises I encountered confirmed what I had suspected. Upon entering, I found Diane and a man in a very intimate situation, with Diane actively engaging and expressing her pleasure. My presence seemed unnoticed until I nearly reached the closet, at which point the man, identified as Stanton North, finally saw me halting abruptly. Diane, initially oblivious to my presence and immersed in the moment, pleaded for the continuation of their intimacy until she realized I was in the room. Her shock and desperation became apparent as she tried to disentangle herself from North. I announced nonchalantly that I was there to pack a bag from the closet, indicating that I intended to leave them to their privacy. As soon as I had gathered my things, this attempt to maintain a semblance of normalcy did little to alleviate the sudden tension and awkwardness that filled the room following my unexpected arrival. With my back turned to them, I continued packing my suitcase with socks and underwear from the dresser. I could overhear Diane insisting that the man disengaged from her, and his acknowledgement of the chaotic situation as I went to retrieve a garment bag from the closet. I noticed the man North making his exit from the bedroom, while Diane frantically searched for something to cover herself. She attempted to engage me, questioning my actions and packing, and tried to dismiss the situation as a misunderstanding. Offering explanations, her words continued as I heard the front door close behind North, leaving me to ponder his departure, especially since Diane's car was the only one outside, indicating he had arrived with her. Throughout this, I chose not to engage with Diane, ignoring her attempts to communicate and her pleas for a chance to explain the situation after informing them not to halt their actions. On my account, I didn't utter another word as I exited the front door and made my way to my car. Diane tried to stop me, pleading for a moment to talk, but I didn't respond to her calls. Opening my car door, I scanned the surroundings for any sign of Stanton North, but found none, contemplating if he might be hiding, perhaps planning to return once he saw me leave. Diane nearly reached my car, running down the walkway in an attempt to catch me before I drove off, but I pulled away just as she was about to grasp the passenger side door handle. The drive to the airport was a blur with my mind. Far from the task of driving, caught up in the turmoil of what had transpired, I questioned how and why such a betrayal could happen, especially when I had been so certain of the solidity of my relationship with Diane. Reflecting on our life together, I found no hint or warning sign that could have prepared me for the shocking discovery. The betrayal felt even more profound, considering the normality of our morning, leaving me to grapple with the stark contrast of her actions later in the day. Diane and I first crossed paths following my father's job promotion, which necessitated our family's relocation over 1,500 m away. This transition was particularly challenging for me, pulling me away from familiar faces and places to a school where I felt utterly isolated. During a particularly lonely lunchtime, seated by myself in the school cafeteria, my solitude was interrupted by the most captivating girl I'd ever seen approaching me. She initiated conversation, identifying me as another new student, and introduced herself as Diane, extending her hand in greeting. It took me a moment to register her gesture before I responded, introducing myself in turn. Our conversation then unfolded over the remainder of the lunch period, where she inquired about my origins and we spent the time acquainting ourselves with each other's stories, marking the beginning of our connection. Tell us you're excited about this story. If you liked the video, press A. If not, press B. Your feedback motivates me to find more positive stories. She had joined me at my table because she had known what I was going through, because the same thing had happened to her the previous year by the time the bell rang. We had made a date for her to show me around the town within 6 weeks. We were going steady and, like all typical teenagers, we were making out like Matt, being a guy with raging hormones. I naturally tried to get Diane to go all the way, but she wouldn't do it. She was determined to honor her promise to her mother to go to her marriage, better version. Luckily, for my sanity, she broke that promise. On her 18th birthday, we had some serious discussions after the night she gave me her virginity. I told her that I wanted to marry her, but that I didn't want to get married until I finished college. She wanted to get married right away, and she wasn't happy with me because I wanted to wait. I was telling my mom about it when she surprised the hell out of me. I had always seen my mom as somewhat conservative, so it took me by surprise when she suggested that I move in with my partner and live together until graduation. I questioned the practicality of such a move, citing my desire to wait until I could afford it, highlighting my concern about balancing supporting a spouse and continuing my education. My mom pointed out that, while I might need to find a part-time job to cover some living expenses like groceries, there was sufficient money in my college fund to afford renting a small place off campus. I gave it some thought and then discussed it with Diane. After talking it through, we agreed to both take on part-time jobs to make it work. We found a small apartment within my budget and then faced the difficult task of informing her parents. Her mother was devastated that Diane had not kept her promise to remain a virgin until marriage, bursting into tears. Diane's father, on the other hand, insulted me thoroughly, inventing new insults as he went along. He then strictly told Diane she was forbidden from seeing me again and demanded we break up. Diane asked me to wait in the car. After that, she emerged 10 minutes later, with 2 suitcases in hand. Never sharing the details of the conversation after I stepped out, it took 3 years before she spoke to her parents again, only reaching out to inform them they had a grandson. Suddenly I was seen in a new light by her parents. I was the wonderful man their daughter was fortunate to find, and their praise was endless. However, the rift had already caused significant damage and I merely tolerated them from then on. Diane eventually reconciled with them, and they became an active part of our family life, proving to be wonderful grandparents to our 3 children. My feelings remained lukewarm at best. Time moved on, our children grew up and moved out, leading us to this moment. Despite everything, our kids were spared the experience of growing up in a divided home at the airport. Early after checking in, I settled into one of the coffee shops to wait for my flight announcement. During this time, I went through North's wallet and checkbook. I had found inside the wallet behind his driver's license was an emergency information card that listed his blood type, among other details, but more importantly, it mentioned an emergency contact Arliss North identified as his wife, along with a contact number. I decided to call this number upon reaching Mrs. North. I introduced myself as Frank Bellows and regretfully informed her that I had discovered her husband in a compromising situation with my wife, highlighting the gravity of the situation. Mrs. North initially thought it was a joke, unable to believe such news, firmly stating her husband would never betray her in such a manner. To convince her of the truth, I suggested she verify my identity with her husband upon his return and to ask for his wallet and checkbook, which he would be unable to produce, as I had taken them after finding them in my house. I informed her of my current location at the airport, waiting for a flight to St. Louis, and offered to personally deliver the items upon my return. Mrs. North, now realizing the seriousness, inquired about my return. I mentioned my uncertain return schedule due to filling in for an absent colleague. When she asked if I could mail the wallet and checkbook, I acknowledged the possibility, but forewarned her that I intended to use some of the money found in the wallet to cope with my distress. I explained that the wallet contained $87 and that I felt the need to use some of it to drink away my sorrows, courtesy of her husband, though I assured her some funds would likely remain. I agreed to send the items to her office, setting the stage for a complicated exchange rooted in betrayal and its aftermath. She provided me with her address, which I carefully noted down. She then requested if I could send the wallet and checkbook overnight, offering to cover the shipping costs, agreeing to her request. I informed her that I needed to leave, as my flight had just been called, and after saying goodbye, I ended the call. My initial plan had been to abandon North's wallet and credit cards in a bathroom counter, hoping they would be found and misused, but contacting his wife altered my course. I hoped this action would lead to significant consequences for him. From the moment I left the house, my cell phone had been incessantly ringing with each call from Diane, which I consistently ignored. As I exited the coffee shop, my phone rang once again, expecting another call from Diane. I was surprised to find it was from my office this time. I returned the call and spoke to Harry. Harry advised me to get in touch with home, relaying that Diane had contacted him in a panic due to her inability to reach me. I explained to Harry that I was deliberately not answering Diane's calls. I disclosed the reason was my discovery of her in a compromising situation at home, which she shouldn't have been in. I mentioned I would consider speaking with her upon my return, hoping to be in a calmer state by then to avoid any extreme reactions. Harry suggested making it easier on myself by instructing the receptionist at work not to forward Diane's calls to me, a measure meant to further distance myself from the immediate turmoil. Right after making sure everything at the office was in tip-top shape and there were no fires to put out, I made a bina for the post office to mail Mrs. North her husband's wallet and checkbook. I threw in a note with my contact details, just in case she needed to get in touch with any questions. Once that was squared away, I got on the phone with the cops to see where they were holding Baker and if I could drop by for a visit. Other than sporting a couple of battered knuckles and a snapped finger, Baker wasn't looking too shabby. He hadn't been in front of a judge for bail yet, because the big shots were waiting to hear from the hospital about how roughed up Smithers was to figure out what charges to slam him with. I filled him in on Harry's worries and pressed him for his side of the story. It was a tale as old as time. He had swung by his place over lunch to grab something he'd left behind that morning, only to catch Smithers in the act with his wife, taking advantage of his own lunch break in a very different way. In the midst of giving Smithers a thorough thrashing, Baker's wife was dialing 911, claiming her husband had lost it and she was scared for her life. The police rolled and Smithers ended up in the hospital and Baker landed in jail. I went to the hospital to visit Smithers. He had a broken nose, 2 broken ribs, 2 cracked ribs, and they took out his right testicle. He told me I didn't mean to hurt anyone. The which provoked me, so I reacted. I'm single and enjoy sex, like any other guy. If anyone's to blame, it's Baker. If he handled the situation with the witch properly, she wouldn't have come after me. I didn't sympathize with him. I phoned Harry sharing the incident and suggesting we move Smithers out of the office unless there's reason to fire him. I promised to investigate the office for anything useful. Baker had a hearing. The next day bail was set at $250,000. He could only afford it by putting his house up, but his wife refused to agree, so he'd remain in jail until his father and brother sorted it out. The next morning, Arl North called me. She asked her husband about a Diane Bellows, and his face drained of color as he claimed he didn't know her when she pressed him and asked for his wallet and checkbook. He said he must have left them at work. Then he changed the subject, asking about dinner. He was aware that he was in significant trouble, but hadn't yet grasped the full extent of his predicament, which he wouldn't understand until the following day, when I would request his wallet and checkbook once more. Regarding the duration of the affair, I admitted to only knowing of its occurrence, because I had stumbled upon them together, and since that moment I hadn't spoken to my wife. I mentioned that I planned to maintain this silence until my return home. I also expressed an interest in hearing her side of the story for comparison purposes. Once I had the chance to speak with her, despite receiving numerous calls from Diane daily, I consistently avoided answering them. It seemed that Harry might have informed her of my whereabouts in St. Louis, leading her to contact me through the office phone when Dixie, one of the receptionists, alerted me to Diane's call. I reluctantly engaged during the call. Diane attempted to initiate a conversation, insisting on clarifying the situation, which she claimed was not as it appeared. My response was one of outright refusal to engage in any discussion, overwhelmed by anger and betrayal to the point of expressing violent thoughts towards her and the man involved. I firmly instructed her not to contact me again until I was back, concluding the call abruptly in mid-afternoon. I got a call from Baker's father telling me that bail had been arranged and that he would be released the next morning. In a way, I was sorry to hear that as long as Baker was in jail and Smithers was in the hospital, I didn't have to go home and deal with Diane. I had dinner and drinks on North again that night and made it back to my room about 7. The phone rang, and knowing it could only be Harry or Arl North. With the number, I answered, finding Arl on the line. After exchanging greetings, she updated me on recent developments. Arl's recounted that, upon his return home, she confronted him once more about his wallet and checkbook. He attempted to deflect by claiming they were stolen from his office by someone on the night cleaning crew and promised to file a complaint. The next day, I found the excuse laughable, questioning internally how long he thought he could maintain such a story. Arles expressed her skepticism directly to him, questioning his intelligence and pointing out the obviousness of his guilt when she mentioned my wife and then requested the wallet and checkbook. She highlighted the impossibility of making such a connection without solid evidence, making it clear she saw through his lies. His denial only fueled her anger, prompting Arles to physically present the wallet and checkbook by throwing them at him. She then explained how she came into possession of them and further revealed her call to his office, which contradicted his claims of not knowing the woman involved. Arles admitted to embellishing the truth to strengthen her position during the confrontation. I told him that when you got home from St. Louis, you were going to stop by and show me the pictures you took with your cell phone camera before they knew you were there. How did he take that? Confronted with undeniable proof, he admitted his mistake, begged for forgiveness, and insisted his cheating was a one-time slip-up, blaming it on my wife's persistent advances. He said her attraction and pursuit made it hard for him to say no, regretting only that he didn't think to use his cell phone camera for proof at the time. When asked if I believed his story about my wife pursuing him, I admitted it could be possible, knowing her behavior wasn't always predictable. As for whether it was a one-time thing, he swore it was, but his honesty was in doubt. He insisted it was his only act of cheating, but I knew otherwise. I'd heard from others about at least 3 times he'd been unfaithful when I wasn't around. I'd never sought confirmation, preferring not to know the truth. When questioned about why I'd even consider my wife chasing him, he explained that his looks had attracted attention, before implying some women might want to verify rumors. Until then, I would have defended my wife's loyalty without question, but seeing her with him changed everything. As our conversation ended, we agreed to share any new information, especially my wife's explanation when I talked to her later at 11. The next morning, Ray Baker phoned me to say he'd been released from jail on bail. He needed the day and the next to sort out his personal matters. His wife had a restraining order against him, so he had to find a new place to stay and arrange with the court to enter his house for his belongings he planned to return. On Thursday, I updated Harry on the situation and informed him that I discovered Smithers had been manipulating his expense reports, possibly giving us cause to let him go. I mentioned I'd likely fly home Thursday evening, taking Friday off for personal matters, and would see him Monday. The next 2 days passed without trouble, and on Thursday morning Ree was back at work after filling him in on office matters. I asked about his situation at home since I was dealing with something similar. He mentioned the restraining order limited him to 500 feet away from her. I can enter the house whenever she's not there, but if she's home and refuses to leave when I want in, I need a court official to accompany me. So I waited down the street until she left for work. Then my brother and I went in and grabbed what I needed. I don't plan on going back. I'm not sure what she's thinking. She got the restraining order, but that's it. She didn't touch the bank accounts. I emptied them yesterday. I thought this state was no fault and everything split evenly in a divorce. Yes, but I'm not aiming for that. I'm just walking away. If she wants a divorce, she can handle it and get half of nothing. When she files, we took out a loan on the house to renovate the basement, so there's no equity and the money I took from the bank will be spent. I can argue, I needed it to set up a new place after she barred me from the house. Oh, I need to call Harry to update my insurance and such. She might explain her actions. But I haven't spoken to her since the cops took me away, and I don't plan to. Why she did it doesn't matter. It matters only that she did, deciding to rest before facing things at home. I booked a morning flight after a good night's sleep and a hearty breakfast. I caught the airport shuttle and was back in Denver by 1100. I went to the bank and withdrew all the money from our savings account. Then I cashed in 5 out of the 9 certificates of deposit we had in the deposit box and transferred all the money to our checking account. Diane was still at work when I got home, so I had the house to myself until 6. I immediately called the credit card companies to get payoff balances for all our cards and canceled all but 5 of them. I decided to keep the American Express card I mainly used for business and 2 other cards under my name, transferring 2 to Diane's name afterward. I returned to the bank to arrange wired transfers to pay off the remaining cards using the money in our checking account with that sorted. I took half of the remaining money from the checking account and opened a new checking account in my name alone. I also organized for another safe deposit box under my name and transferred 2 of the remaining 4 CDs into it. Then I headed back home since the kids had grown up and moved out. I had converted one of their bedrooms into a home office. The other 2 were kept as guest rooms for when they visited. I chose the spare bedroom next to the dining area and moved all my belongings there once settled. Diane came home calling out as she searched the house. I stayed quiet until she reached upstairs, finding me facing away from the door when she begged for a talk. I turned to confront her about her unfaithfulness. Despite her reaction, I shifted the focus to money matters, asking her to wait downstairs. While I got some papers when I joined her in the kitchen, I explained I wouldn't rush into any decisions about us, though she seemed relieved. Initially, I clarified that I meant to distance myself instead of diving into divorce. I told her about the changes I made with our finances, suggesting she open her own accounts, while keeping a joint one for shared expenses. I stressed why I chose this, making sure she understood. While I explained the household accounts, Diane remained puzzled by my actions, so I reminded her of why I did it, especially considering her betrayal. Despite the seriousness of the situation, I offered a practical solution to handle our finances going forward. I handed her a piece of paper detailing the household expenses, including the mortgage, utilities, taxes, and insurance, informing her that we would now function as roommates. I instructed her to contribute half of these expenses to the household account each month. I explained that we would share the house, except for 2 rooms. She would have the master bedroom, while I would occupy Carol's old room. Diane questioned my decision to move into Carol's room instead of the master bedroom, suggesting I should stay with her. I firmly rejected the idea, stating that, after witnessing her actions in the master bedroom, I couldn't bear to occupy the same space or share a bed with her. She attempted to downplay the situation, claiming there was more to it than I assumed. However, I remained steadfast in my belief that I had witnessed her engaging in infidelity with another man in our home and on our bed. Okay, Frank, but let me explain, it was just sex, nothing more. There was no love or affection. Just curiosity. I love you, Frank. I always have, always will. My feelings for Stan were just lust, plain and simple. It was a one-time thing out of curiosity. If you hadn't come home, you wouldn't have known and it wouldn't have happened again. She explained, but that's the issue, Diane. I did come home and I do know, and it changes everything. You cheated on me, which means I can't trust you. If I can't trust you, then everything you say is under scrutiny. You say you love me, can you love me and betray me? Can you love me and disrespect me by bringing another man into our home and sharing our bed? What kind of love and respect is that, giving me another man's leftovers? No, Diane. I can't trust you anymore. You say it was a one-time thing, but I have to question it. Even if it was true, you still betrayed me. You broke our vows, and for what? To satisfy your curiosity. What could possibly be worth risking our marriage for? I responded. She glanced away as she spoke. His size. Can you believe it, his size? Why on earth was I curious about that? Some of the girls at the office had dated him and they couldn't stop talking about how big he was and how satisfying it felt. I heard their stories, but I didn't really think much of it until he started showing interest in me. Even then, it took me a while to start thinking about it. So he was trying to seduce you? I asked. I suppose so, but I didn't pay much attention at first, but I enjoyed the attention. Who wouldn't want to feel attractive at my age? Having a man 10 years younger than me pay attention was a huge boost to my confidence. I had lunch with him a few times and danced with him at office gatherings. It was when we danced that I started to think about the stories I'd heard. I felt impressed against me, and he did seem rather large. The more I thought about it, the more curious I became. I was a virgin when I met you, and you're the only man I've been with. I started wondering what it would be like with another man, especially one rumored to be so well endowed. You say all the other girls talked about Stan's size and abilities in bed. How many other girls? I asked. 7, she answered. 7 of them. Stan had sex with 7 of them. I queried. They said he did 7 of them in your office alone. That would seem to show that Stan was pretty promiscuous. Did you ever stop to think that a guy who was screwing anything that moved might pick up a disease or to somewhere along the line? I remarked. Oh, come on, Frank. If that were the case, he would have given it to the girls he made love to, and you can believe that if he did, it would be broadcast all over the office in minutes. She argued. You can have it and not know it, Diane. In some cases, you can have it for months before you show signs. If I were you, I'd go and get myself tested. I suggested. The important thing, Frank, is that Stan meant nothing to me. There was no love involved, and I can't say that there was even much, like she explained. That's not what it sounded like when I walked into the room. You know I like sex, Frank, and you know how vocal I get when I make love to you. She retorted, so I made some noise. It was because I was in the middle of having sex and not because I had any special feelings for Stan. It was a mistake, Frank, a major mistake, and I'm sorry as hell that I slipped up, and I can promise you that it will never happen again. I love you, Frank, and you know that I do. You can't throw away 25 good years because of one mistake. She pleaded. I'm not throwing anything away. Diane. You were the one who threw it away when you brought another man into my house and took him on my bed. I replied as I got up and left the kitchen. I went back upstairs to the den and lost myself in some paperwork. I'm a fairly light sleeper, and that night, about an hour after I went to bed, the noise of the bedroom door opening woke me up. Diane entered the room quietly and closed the door softly behind her. Since it was summer, I slept without clothes lying at top. The blankets she leaned over me trying to kiss me. Diane had always had a way of melting me with her touch, and it seemed she was trying to do it again to win back my favor. She was completely taken aback when I pushed her away. Just leave me be, Diane. I have no interest in being someone's second choice. She got off the bed and left the room in tears. About 20 minutes later, I drifted off to sleep undisturbed for the rest of the night. Diane greeted me with a good morning while she was in the kitchen preparing coffee. As I came downstairs after my shower, I responded with a non-committal grunt and avoided further interaction until the coffee was ready. I filled my travel mug and left for work without further acknowledgement. Later in the morning around 10, I called Alls North to update her on the situation. I informed her about Diane's revelation regarding the number of women involved with her husband, describing him as the office. Arls inquired if I believed Diane's account. I admitted that, prior to discovering her infidelity, I would have been inclined to trust her, but now I questioned her motives. I expressed uncertainty about whether her story was genuine or simply an attempt to justify her actions. Regarding my plans, I stated that while the marriage was effectively over, I wasn't inclined to initiate divorce proceedings. Instead, I intended to cohabit with Diane as roommates, avoiding financial ruin over her infidelity. Arl mentioned she was still contemplating her own course of action and suggested we keep in touch and arranged to meet for lunch. We bid each other luck before ending the call for the following week. I made sure to leave before Diane woke up, and I kept myself occupied until late in the day. To avoid going home, Diane would be awake when I returned, but I paid her no attention on the next weekend. She attempted to join me in bed once again, but I firmly instructed her to stay away and leave me alone. She told "Darn it, Frank. Please don't do this to me. I love you, Frank, and I want to be with you." I answered, "I don't want you, Diane, you've been damaged," she pleaded. "Oh my God, Frank. It was only once. I haven't even spoken to him since he left the house." It was a lapse in judgment. "Frank, please give me another chance. I know it was wrong, and I'm truly sorry. I promise it won't happen again." I responded, "The issue, Diane, is that I can't be certain. It was only once. He could have been your third or fourth lover, or even your 10th. You might still be seeing him during your lunch breaks at a motel when I caught you with him. You shattered my trust, Diane, and I can't trust you to tell me the truth anymore." She begged, "Please, Frank. There must be a way for us to fix this. I'll do anything, Frank, anything at all." I declined. "Sorry, Diane, but there's no chance of us reconciling because I don't want to seeing you with North with your legs wrapped around him and begging him. Killed all the feelings I had for you, but look at it positively. You're free to explore your desires now, just not in this house. This place is neutral ground. Take your man elsewhere, and I won't bring my women here." She questioned. "Your women?" I explained I have no intention of giving up my bed life. I'm not a bad-looking guy, and I've had plenty of opportunities to fool around, but I never did because I promised during our wedding that I'd be faithful to you. You made the same vows, but you broke them when you broke yours. You released me from mine. At least I won't be bringing mine here where you can see it." She looked at me, and I could tell what she was thinking. She was thinking that sharing the house and being around each other would give her a chance to work her way back into my life, and that is just what I wanted her to think. I decided to give her a load to carry. The only reason I'm doing this whole sharing the house thing is that I don't want to make the lawyers rich by going through a divorce, and I don't want to give up what I have here at the house to live in an apartment. I wouldn't have a garage to work in, a basement workshop, and I wouldn't have a patio where I can sit and enjoy a drink. As I watch the sunset, you have two choices: Diane, live with the new status quo or not. If you choose not to, then you can either move out or take over the house payments and expenses, and I'll move out. You say that you really do love me. So here is your chance to prove it. You can accept STE home sharing, or you can take the house and cost me my garage, my workshop and my patio. Just like you cost me my wife, your choice. There is no chance, she asked. I don't see how there could be, Diane. She was silent for a few moments and then she opened her mouth and drove the final nail into her coffin. What are you going to do with the pictures? Frank, the pictures, the ones you took with your cell phone camera. She inquired. She hadn't spoken to North since he fled the house. So how did she learn about the cell phone pictures? It was a tale concocted by a ruse and passed on to her husband, 5 days after I caught Diane and North in our bedroom. No, I couldn't trust anything Diane said anymore. I couldn't physically harm her and kicking her out would hurt me more than it would punish her, but having her around while I ignored her would torment her mentally, and that was the best I could hope for. I had no doubt she loved me, and I knew she would cling to the slim chance of winning back my affection. It wasn't going to happen. I meant it when I said seeing her with North had extinguished all my feelings for her, but the longer she held on to hope, the longer my retaliation would endure. With my plan for revenge against Diane set, I shifted my focus to stand North. The private investigator's findings confirmed my suspicions, despite being caught by both me and his wife. It hadn't slowed him down one bit. Besides his wife, he was involved with 5 other women in the 3 weeks I had the piece tracking him. He hadn't done anything with Diane, but he was intimately involved with 2 of her colleagues. One of them, Mary Ellen Bingham, had a husband who worked late shifts every Tuesday and Thursday after work. North would visit Mary Ellen at her home on Sunflower Way. Staying for 2 hours before leaving. Glancing at my watch, I realized he would be leaving the house in 10 minutes if he stuck to his routine. I parked my car a block away and approached the Bingham residence, circling around behind the garage. As I arrived, I donned latex gloves and a ski mask. Mary Ellen's garage had space for 3 cars. When North visited, he parked inside and closed the garage door to avoid arousing suspicion among the neighbors. We wouldn't want Mary Ellen's husband finding out. Would be using a pry bar. I forced the lock on the back door of the garage. I waited as the connecting door to the house opened and North stepped out. Mary Ellen stood without a cloth in the doorway watching North walk to his car. The taser 50,000 volts had him wriggling on the garage floor before Mary Ellen could scream. I spoke in a disguised voice, "Make a sound or call the cops, and your husband will discover everything. It's best you go back inside and act like nothing's happening out here. I won't kill him, but he'll learn a lesson from another betrayed husband." She leapt back and shut the door. Mary Ellen recognized me from the company events Diane took me to, but I relied on the ski mask and my altered voice to conceal my identity from her. I couldn't risk her calling the cops, so I needed to act fast. I pulled North's pants off of him, and believe me, when I tell you that pulling pants off of a guy in convulsions isn't easy. Once I had his pants off, I took my revenge, proud of his package. Was he well? His package was going to pay. I took the fully charged cattle prod and touched it to his Johnson as many times as I could until it was fully discharged. I kicked him twice in the ribs for the hell of it, and then I took his wallet and checkbook and got the hell out of there. I heard no sirens, so maybe Mary Ellen didn't call the cops as I drove away. I thought about what I had just done. I had no idea how much damage, if any, the cattle prod would cause or whether there would be any lasting effects, but I can honestly say that I enjoyed every one of North's screams when a cattle prod charge flashed through his Johnson. I never did hear how Mary Ellen made out on the deal. Was she able to get North out of there and keep her husband in the dark, or did she have to call for medical attention for North and explain an ambulance at the house to her? "Hubby?" Still wearing the latex gloves, I put the wallet and checkbook in a package I had already prepared and sent it to Arl at her office. There was no note enclosed, and I would deny I knew anything about it, but when her hubby came home hurting and then his wallet showed up in the mail, she would think she knew who had done it. About 3 weeks after my encounter with North, I got a call from Arl. She asked if I was free for lunch. I replied that I hadn't made any plans and asked why. Arl suggested we meet face to face and proposed noon at the Leo. She joked that she'd be the redhead nervously scanning every guy who entered to find me. I agreed to the plan when I arrived at the Lido. I didn't see Arl's anxiously scanning faces, but it was easy to spot her as the only redhead sitting alone. I approached her table and greeted her as Mrs. North. She corrected me saying it's Arl, not Mrs. North, a term I hadn't used since our initial phone call, taking a seat across from her. I inquired about the reason for our lunch meeting. Arl expressed her desire to get a good look at the man who she felt was messing up her life. Confused, I asked how I was doing. That she recounted how I made her confront the truth about North's infidelity, and then, after she gave him another chance, I somehow took away the best thing he had going for him. Perplexed, I pressed for clarification. Arl explained that, although Stan was a good provider and father, his prowess in bed was his best quality, which I apparently ruined, denying any involvement. I asked how I could have done such a thing. Arl didn't buy my innocence, insisting I knew exactly what I had done to Stan's private parts. She claimed that since then he hadn't been able to perform, accusing me of dodging responsibility with my trademark. Excuse of it's in the mail. Just as the waitress approached to take our order, Arl requested a salad and iced tea. I couldn't help but admire her. She was stunning, and it seemed like her husband was missing out. Arl proved to be not only beautiful, but also sharp. After Arl placed her order, she turned to me and asked, "Well," I feigned innocence. "Well, what do I pass?" she inquired, catching me off guard. I stumbled with my words. "What are you talking about now?" She didn't let me off easy. What I wasn't supposed to notice. You checking me out just now, caught in the act. I could only manage a goofy smile and replied, "Who, me? Yes, you." She confirmed, her tone suggesting that she knew exactly what was going on. "And I hope you like what you see, because the real reason for this little get-together is to offer it to you." Her directness left me speechless. I didn't know what the look on my face was saying to her. I thought, as she continued, "I'm a very sexual person with a very high sex drive, and since you have taken my play toy away from me, I feel that it is only fair that you take over his duties." I was taken aback, unsure of how to respond. She smiled knowingly and added, "I'll bet you weren't expecting that one, were you, to be honest?" "It never entered my mind," I admitted, "well, Frank." She pressed on, "Here is the way I see it. You deprived me of my bed partner, so it is only fair that you take his place in second. What can be a more fitting way to get back at your wife and my husband?" Her proposal left me conflicted. I don't know. Arl's the package is outstanding, but I don't know that it is a good idea. The situation that I'm in right now could be upset. If I give Diane grounds to sue for divorce, you aren't divorcing her?" she asked, surprised. I explained my plan and Arl laughed. "You're evil, aren't you? But not to worry. I don't intend to broadcast it. If Stan never gets the use of his equipment back, I'll divorce him, and I don't want him to have grounds to countersue either." "You are serious about this?" I inquired, still hesitant. "You beta?" she affirmed with a nod, and that's how my affair with Arl North began. It's been ongoing for more than a year now, and there's no sign of it stopping anytime soon. Her husband still struggles with tile dysfunction. Doctors find no physical cause, so it's likely psychological. A ruse plans to give him until the year's end, and if there's no improvement, she's ready to move on. As far as I know, Diane isn't seeing anyone. However, she knows I'm involved with someone, though she's clueless about who. The knowledge of my affair tortures her, yet she clings to hope for a miracle that won't happen. It's the perfect. I'm going to turn this one over to you. What do you make of this situation? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and as always, a huge thank you from the bottom of my heart for getting involved in today's stories. Your love, support, and time mean the world to me. So, thank you so much for being part of this. I really appreciate your time. I'll see you in the next one. Take care and much love.